It was just beyond.
So this is like the Brigitte Bardot inspired pink gingham dress. It was produced in 1964. It had this keyhole back, a little matching kerchief. You sold 17,000 of them.
Yes.
What do you think, looking back, was the appeal of that item?
Felicity Green, the mirror, commanded this dress to be designed at 25 shillings, understood the market. This market of 15-year-olds who'd left home, and she was completely in touch with that. I think it sort of hit the right mood and hit the right people, which was so interesting.
Trying to find, I can imagine, the fabric for 17,000 dresses and matching kerchiefs could not have been easy. But let me turn back to the inspiration for Biba. The name is so catchy. Where did it come from?
Oh, it's funny. Fitz came and said, "Have you got a name for it?" I said, "No." Yes, well, let's think of something. And I thought, well, it's an abbreviation of my sister's name, which is Lithuanian, and Biba from Geruta, and it had to be feminine and young.
It's
and
definitely.
My sister never forgave me for.
I thought, Barbara, I thought she'd be delighted.
No, she said it's everyone.
You know, it was such a successful brand. It would be one thing if it didn't get off the ground, but instead it became. Well, let's talk about what it became, Martin. I mean, for people who weren't around at that time or hanging out in the 7 stories of Biba, having a great time, like it was kind of a clubby atmosphere from what I read. Tell us a little bit more about its impact and its significance.
Well, I think Biba did change the way that people dressed. People change people's lives. I mean, this exhibition, we've got people coming around and just sort of sharing their memories of it. And when we did the exhibition in Brighton, you'd have groups of women that didn't know each other, and they'd sort of stand in front of these garments that they've been able to afford, because we sort of can't understand today that at that time affordable fashion didn't really exist. You used to be sort of taken to a department store and dressed for the season. You didn't buy clothes for that moment. And so it transformed the way that people dressed, and I think people have hung on to the way that they felt when they wore Biba clothes. And as I said,
but also it was freedom to get away from their parents, because children had no say. I mean, I know they were 15-year-olds, but they weren't supposed to know what they're doing. And everybody left home and went to London and got a job typing, earned money. The big draw to London was the bands and the music, and going out at night, and just mixing together with one age group. It was very exciting.
So that was the swinging 60s in London, and many people have talked about Biba being the first lifestyle brand, which of course we're familiar with now, but even selling baked beans.
Well, that exploded.
Oh, did they? Oh, I didn't hear about that.
In a museum.
With big people were able to go into a store to have that Biba experience. You know, you literally live, sleep, and eat Biba.
And also the boys like big things. You have to look after the boys.
The woman gets a wide-brimmed hat and a nice suit, and the guy gets a can of beans. What do you remember, Barbara, though, of that time? I'm thinking if you walk through the doors, and 7 stories that you have been instrumental in creating. What was that like?
It was terrifying because you couldn't tidy it up very quickly. So it was always a kind of big chaos of merchandise, which they were allowed to touch. Most stores and shop, you always had an assistant who sort of said, "This is the thing for you," and you weren't allowed to rummage among things.
Mm-hmm. Like lots was going on, right? It was kind of the excitement, which I read about, getting in there and getting the latest fashion and trying it on. That changing rooms were chaotic and great fun with music. It's quite something to think of, because I'm trying to think, is there something like that now? What do you think,
No.
Martin?
Oh no.
No, Barbara.
People also think it was an experiment and
Yeah.
experience that just was going to happen once. You know,
Yes.
it was all about being indulgent, you know, so you could go into the sort of the homeware department and you could have a Beaver bedroom, but you could take your sort of pick of Beaver bedrooms. You could have it in leopard print, you could have it in all different decor. So it was massively indulgent, and you didn't have to buy something. You could just
Yeah.
go in and experience it and have a day in Beaver and then go home to your ordinary life.
And it was edited for you because wherever fabrics, there was always fab colours for the tights. Thank you, Mary Pont. And there was makeup colours, so people knew they didn't have to look at magazines. They could just look there and find out what the next step was.
Makeup
Yeah.
was huge.
Yes, yeah.
Did you expect the makeup to be so successful?
No, because well, we started with one colour, which was chocolate colour, to make it look like sepia, and that was tough enough to find and get people to manufacture for you, even although you told them, I'm paying.
But it was because essentially these guys, these manufacturers,
Yes.
just didn't trust you because you were young women in business, and you'd go
Absolutely.
in with these ideas of what makeup could be,
Yeah.
and they would just poo-poo it because it
Yeah,
was just not.
Because
what
they were looking at the figures. The last big sale was horrible dark pink something or other, and they did
But it was phenomenally successful. You know, it was
oh huge.
three concerts
Yeah.
in 3 years.
I thought also, reading about the cosmetics aspect of it, that you were the first that was doing it in the UK for black skin.
Oh yes, the foundation. Yeah.
Yes.
Because our colour scheme for all the other bits, the eyes and things, was very strong. But we had lots of girls from the Commonwealth working for us, plus loads and loads of customers. And there was no foundation, it was all too pale. So it was only obvious to do higher colours.
You also did a makeup range for men.
Yes.
Beaver was very inclusive. Before it was a thing, you know, and now everyone's, as they should be, keen that everyone is catered to. But back in the day, that wasn't the case.
No,
you know, so
God.
you would do cosmetic advertising the gay press, which
Yeah.
hadn't been done before.
Yeah.
And it's not just a tiny little advert. This is like a 4-page massive advert, and obviously newspapers run on their advertising budget. So you supported the sort of
Yeah.
gay community when people weren't doing it. And in the 90s, all these companies were
But
seen as
not
being
only
edgy.
gay, the musicians needed sort of more exotic clothes.
Yeah.
And they always bought all the sequin jackets. And,
But Big Beaver was a sort of
Yeah.
unofficial hub of that
Oh.
glam rock scene.
Absolutely.
How much fun, Barbara, did you have a ball?
I did. Exhausting. No, it was amazing. It was very emotional, you know, it was very exciting. And, golly.
Reading through the history, I felt so sad when Biba closed in
Yeah.
1975, and I know you've gone on to do so many incredible things, which we could also talk about. Maybe that should be another exhibition. But how was that when it shut? Because it was like this whirlwind roller coaster of Biba that you'd had for a decade.
Oh, I was desperate. And then we just went straight to Brazil and started producing there for Fiorucci and
Passerelle.
Passerelle.
But how did
Yeah.
you feel when it closed? Because you've been
Oh,
working on
it was just terrible. Terrible
Yeah.
time. In fact, the first time I've been down the high street was with Rosie yesterday. We went on
Oh,
High Street.
really? Down
Yes,
where the
I
store
mean-
was.
Yes, and I mean, it's like, there's nothing there on the ground floor.
Yes, very, very sad that it's not there now. But I want to come to what is there, and that's the exhibition. What can we expect, Martin? Run us through.
Well, one, you're going to be blown away by how fabulous Beaver was. Some of the clothes in the exhibition are 60 years old. They've kept their colour, kept their shape, and I think you'll be able to understand it was all from one individual. So the exhibition is very much about Barbara and Barbara's vision. I mean, Biba is still with us today.
Yes.
Being sold at Fraser's, which is a great testament to what Barbara created back in the 60s, and just how amazing the clothes are.
Barbara, we talked about what it was like to walk down the street with Biba not there anymore. What's it like to walk through the exhibition?
Oh, that's great. I see, oh my God, we should have done this. Take it out. Semen more than that seem. You see the past.
That was Barbara Hulanicki and also Martin Pell, and the Biba story, 1964 to 1975, is on at the Fashion and Textile Museum until the 8th of September. Well, it definitely struck a chord with you. Let me read some of the messages that have come in. The Biba store was like a Hollywood dream store. It was dark and brooding, gold and cool. I visited it in my youth and remember sitting on one of the sofas pretending to be a model. The reality for me was that the goods were expensive, so though I longed for a dress, all I bought was one lipstick, deep purple, of course, and a black and white square scarf. Another, I went to Biba in the 70s. I sat in the window. I felt like I was in a wonderland. I have always been fascinated with beaded 20s dresses since that day. I'm sitting in Berg Island Hotel as I speak with my large collection of restored beaded dresses. Thank you, Barbara, for being my inspiration. So many messages that are coming in. I like this one as well. I visited as a sixth former. I felt I'd entered another world. I could only afford a pair of tights, which I still have unopened in the black packaging 40 years later. Your messages are also coming in on social media about attacks on teachers. There's one here. My husband, a teacher at a special school, is off work with complex PTSD following numerous verbal and physical assaults in school. He's in a secondary mental health care, unlikely to return to school. It's affected the whole family, and I shake as I type this. I'm so sorry about that. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Anonymous, who got in touch. I want to turn next to Australia. My next guest is the youngest woman in the Parliament in the state of Victoria in Australia. And from posting TikToks about animal rights, politics, beer, she's archiving her latest life achievements with tattoos. She has shared photos of herself pole dancing. Her name is Georgie Purcell. She's not your average politician, but she has also been the target of almost constant online sexist attacks and abuse. On occasions, it's made her fear for her life. And you might remember Miss Purcell because earlier this year, a local news channel in Melbourne digitally altered a photo of her, giving her larger breasts and also putting her in more revealing clothing. Channel 9 later apologised for the edits, but the whole episode then opened a debate about how women are treated in politics. Georgie, welcome to the programme, and thank you for staying up late for us, probably getting to after 9 o'clock in Melbourne.
G'day, thanks for having me on. It's no problem at all.
So how have things been since that photo edit? I mentioned that it's opened a conversation, but it's more about women in the media. It's really about some of the challenges that female politicians have to face.
Yeah, I was completely overwhelmed by the response. And I think the first thing that I would say is I probably didn't realise just how horrific it was to have my body photoshopped until I went public with it and I saw the response. And I think that's a really good example of how hardened and desensitized you get and you become as a woman in politics, because you deal with situations like this all of the time. But it certainly spurred a conversation, not just with women in public life, but women in everyday life, and the threat that image altering poses to all of us.
I just want to read the apology that News 9 gave to you, Georgie. 9 News Melbourne boss Hugh Nayland said he unreservedly apologised to Miss Purcell for what he described as the graphic error. He says, as is common practice, the image was resized to fit our specs. During that process, the automation by Photoshop created an image that was not consistent with the original. This did not meet the high editorial standards we have. Adobe, instead, which produces Photoshop, said any changes to this image would have required human intervention and approval. So a war of words there, but it basically was a much more sexualized image that was put out of you instead of the photo that should have been there originally. And what was the reaction to that photo? Did you get support, or was it backlash?
Yeah, so of course, so for those who haven't seen the photo, I was given larger breasts and my dress was turned into a two-piece. And I actually noticed initially that it wasn't the original photo because I had these like chiseled abs that I definitely don't have, but my stomach's heavily tattooed and the skin was bare. So I pulled up the original and put them side by side and I realized that it had quite significant alteration. And when I posted it online, the response was overwhelming. I mean, obviously it's gone international. That's why I'm here speaking with you all. But I received an outpouring of support, but with it, again, an absolute pylon of, misogynistic and sexist abuse online, which has become a real feature of my life in politics.
And how do you manage that? Because, we hear about a lot of politicians that are concerned about that abuse and the fear, of course, of it going into your day-to-day life as you interact with people as well. Do you get any